Thank you, Georgianne. As you can see, this is Steve's retrospective, and it was just a stunning array of work that was coming in over the last week, and we had such a joy and challenge to present it in a way that gives each work its justice. We tried to work with Littlefield too, who couldn't be here tonight, but we tried to hang the show chronologically. So it starts here and flows around the room, and we kept the paintings separate, and you can see some wood sculpture that Steve also brought in at the last, some tools of the trade. But if you wanted to view it in a chronological fashion, starting with one of his earliest drawings in 1970, and the earliest etching of his lifelong passion, bromeliads. This is where you would begin. Before I introduce Steve, I want to mention the other two exhibits that we have. When I went this last year to the American Association of Museums conference in Minneapolis, I saw a fabulous show by the High Point Center for Printmaking, which is a nonprofit center devoted to printmaking education, similar to what the Art Center does, but their sole media is printmaking. And I saw it at the Minneapolis Museum of Art amidst their collections of antiquities. They have this beautiful, beautiful exhibit of contemporary techniques in printmaking. So, as you know, we like to cycle our exhibits through, so we always have a chance to show works by our faculty and our students. So that will be in the Intel Gallery, the High Point prints. And then, of course, right out here outside the hall are works by primarily Steve's students. He founded our program in 1991. He was here well a decade before me, and designed and fabricated the press that the students use at our Weaver Cottage with Lloyd Jones, and Diana's here tonight. That's the press that everybody uses to this day. We also have Barbara Grazul Hubbard, who's on our printmaking faculty currently, and we are honoring Lynn Cart Anderson in the atrium, also one of our long-standing faculty members here who we lost in October of this last year. So it is truly an honor to have had Steve in our midst all these years, and it's an honor to see the works that the students who've been devoted and working alongside of them have created.
First of all, I want to thank the Art Center for having me as a teacher, and also in 91 buying the press. I want to also thank all of you for coming, but I want to thank my students and colleagues. Most of them are colleagues now rather than students. They're kind of beyond that point. But anyway, I'm very lucky to have been teaching here and being here and have the Art Center support printmaking, traditional printmaking, I might add. It's you don't have to have electricity to do the kind of printmaking that's in the hallway. And also on the wall in the cafe area, there's also some wonderful work there by I hate to call them students, but more colleagues and friends. I also want to thank Lloyd Jones. In 1979, Lloyd said he took an etching class at this art center, and he had a studio in Safety Harbor and some other artisans there, and Lloyd said, "Hey, I'm going to show you my etchings," because he knew I did etchings, and I got to use the great line of, "Hey, come up and see my etchings." And So I showed her the etchings I'd done at USF. And Jonesy said, well, why don't we build an etching press? And I said, well, you know, I don't think we can just build an etching press, but we did, and we built 6 etching presses. Number 4 is the one we use here. Barbara has number 2 that we built for Bill Rink. And also there's a lady named Kathy Devine who was taking my class. She now owns press number 3. So I have number 1 still, and number 5 Diane has, and number 6 is at Hillsborough Junior College. So all of the presses that we built are actually in operation and producing prints. So I'm very lucky that if I could put anything on my my resume, is building 6 etching presses is right there at the very top. And it couldn't have been done without Lloyd Jones. Anyway, I've always been an artist. I think I was the middle kid, and paint by numbers and model planes and boats and stuff. I was the kid you gave one of those to, and I was involved for hours. But I was very lucky that at Largo High School I had a wonderful teacher named Tremaine Spencer, who really sort of got me thinking about being an artist for the rest of my life. And because of him, I wanted to be a high school art teacher. So I went to USF. I was very lucky I was out of high school for 5 years before I got a chance to go to college. And USF had started Graphic Studio a year before I started there in 1968. And I was very lucky to, of course, when I got there, I was already thought I was a pretty good painter, and then I found out that I didn't really know nothing. But I had wonderful teachers, a guy named Jeff Kronsnoble, and a guy named Don Saff. Don Saff started Graphic Studio, and I was very lucky to have them as drawing instructors. So as you look around the room, most of my work is really based on drawing. All aspects of drawing. To me, the basic level of being a visual artist is learning to draw. And this is the earliest piece, this drawing of the number 7 watercolor brush from 1970. It was a piece that really kind of bumped me over the edge of just doing life drawing classes and, just drawing like naked women. I love naked women, but I got kind of tired of just doing that all the time. So I ended up, this is the first drawing I did of paintbrushes, and I ended up doing 3 or 4. I did a paintbrush family. I had paintbrushes in the missionary position. But it sort of took me into another place. And Don Saff told me that I had taken the step that I was not a student anymore. I was now an artist. Anyway, from that point, I love doing etchings. The thing about working at USF and the printmaking studio is that most artists can't afford a press, so you come to where the press is. And a printmaking studio is a very collegial place. We're all pretty much egalitarian. There's no number 1 person. There's no boss. There's no anything, and it's all a very equal place. And I really missed that at USF. And I started doing outdoor art shows in '76 and mainly showing drawings and a few etchings from USF, but didn't really go. I mean, in those days in the outdoor art show circuit, there wasn't a show every weekend. There was no Howard Allen shows, not to knock on old Howard, but anyway, it was a very interesting time for me. And then when meeting Jonesy, I was mainly doing lots of drawings. At the time, I was also working for a modular building business, and I was doing architectural renderings. And that's where I learned to use a rapidograph pen, which all the pieces right here, the top one it's all horizontal lines. There's no other lines but horizontal in that one. So I was doing these drawings with the pen in one hand and using the straight edge in my left hand. And in those days, I actually had a callus on my thumb and my finger from moving the straight edge. I went from there to stipple, just dots. So these particular pieces are just dots. I also have always wanted to do, mainly because of the Don Saff prints that he did at USF that were layered. Not so much with glass and plastic in between, but sort of cut out, and they were lithographs. And so I kind of got turned on to doing layered things. So this has like 3 pieces of glass, and it's 3 layered, actually 4 pieces. But it's layered drawing. I would do a drawing and then cut it out and layer it between other glasses and other pieces of glass. And I actually lived at 215 Monroe Street, which is right here in Dunedin, and that was the front door. Let's see, we'll sort of go at the same time. I was doing Prismacolor pencil drawings. This is before I had a press, so as we go around the room, these particular drawings are a combination of Prismacolor and pen and ink. Again, cutting them out and doing various things. In 1979 is when Jonesy and I built the first press. So from that point on, I started doing etchings again. I was also, about that time, a little after that, I started working at Ruth Eckerd Hall hanging shows. In one of the shows, one of the first, in fact, the very first show I hung was a Matisse block print show. And the paper was Reeves BFK, and I had already done some block printing, but in the Japanese style of burnishing the back of the paper, but the European paper that I was used to working on was too thick for that. And when I saw the Matisse show and I saw the watermark of the paper, I thought, well, this had to be done on a press. And so I had this etching press, and I figured out and taught myself how to print these linoleums on an etching press. And so that's really opened up a whole new area for me. It's like the bicycle pieces there. That's actually 6 pieces of linoleum glued onto plywood, and then it's printed on silk. I found that, one thing about printing on fabric, it's really pretty cool, but that's a whole other place. But anyway, as we sort of go around the room, there's still some pen and ink drawings. A lot of the block prints are from places where I camped. I worked from photos. A lot of time in the early days, I would actually work from the slides and project the slides. And one of the things that I thought was really kind of cool was working from color and translating like Technicolor to black and white. And I thought I got kind of good at that. And I didn't do any color work for probably 20 years. And it was 1997, one of my nephews had a restaurant in Reno's that was at Clearwater Mall and in Clearwater Beach, and he asked me to do a mural for him, and so I did, and I basically did a bromeliad greenhouse, but I hadn't painted in 20 years, and after about 12 feet, it was a 6 by 28 foot, and after about 12 feet, I had learned I was always an oil painter, and at USF, one of the things I learned from Jeff Crossnoble, he would mount Reeves lightweight paper, like wallpaper to gesso masonite, and then project on it and do dry brush oil painting onto that. And I started doing that. I really love doing that. But once I got into the black and white, I didn't paint for, like I say, 20 years. And I really love black and white. It's powerful. It's most of the things in here are black and white. To me, it's you know, it's there's a purity to black and white. I know I've said more than once in my classes that, and to other people, that when you're painting with color, you can have great color and bad design. But if you're dealing with black and white, there's no place to hide with bad design. So you have to really be pure. And once I started painting again, I realized that I'm a much better painter now than I ever was because of that 20 years of black and white and really dealing with design more than just color, you know. The monoprints that are on the wall, those are basically done on plastic and they're printed on an etching press and they're basically palette knife paintings. It's like the first one over here that's a portrait of Janice Gallo that some of you might know. That she ran Ruth Eckerd Hall's visual arts program when they first started. And I was very lucky to work with her, and Diane Jones also. We just worked every 6 weeks. We would hang art shows, and that's when I saw the Matisse show. But anyway, that particular one and some of the dance pieces, you know, basically you do like a gesture drawing. Some of you that have had drawing courses, one of the first things you do when you have a life drawing class is you do a gesture drawing, which is kind of a quick drawing. And so I was doing that with a palette knife and rolling out ink and then carving through it. And Janice's, the portrait of Janice, I basically rolled the ink up in a solid black and then carved it away with a palette knife. Some of the other pieces were basically done the same way. Once I started doing those, I never would clean the plate, the plastic off. I would just do another one right on top of it. So I had these wonderful backgrounds that started happening. Of course, the whole time I was doing that, I'm still doing linoleum block prints. The squares print in the back of the room is actually 9 linoleum block prints. And I watercolored each one of them differently. And then back to Jeff Kronsnoble and mounting paper on masonite. Those are wallpaper to gesso masonite. And I think it's, you know, in a way, it's I really like those. And it's actually the first thing I ever did that was a square. And for those of you in the room that are artists, you know, working with a square is kind of hard, you know. We're so used to rectangles that go vertical or horizontal, but dealing with a square, there's a whole other design thing that happens. And that particular piece, even though it's a square, but I had and it has everything to do with perspective drawing, and the vanishing point for all the edges is about this far away from the edge of the block. So I was, anyway, that's sort of how that happens. And of course, it's all drawing. When I do my block prints, I start with a pencil, and then I sort of get all the design stuff out of the way, and then I go back with a rapidograph pen with India ink, and I redraw it. And in that process, all of the design flaws and problems jump out at you. So when I carve a linoleum block, I have a finished pen and ink drawing. Then I just carve out the white. Doesn't sound simple, but that's the Ecstasy of Tedium. You know, but let's see, we'll start, now there's a monoprint back there, the square frame series. I did a series of those monoprints, and that is, printed a block print, a linoleum block print, on the paper, and then I did a mono print for the background, but I blocked out the block print so that the mono print color and everything was blocked out. So that's sort of a combination of a block print and mono printing, sort of a combination of the two. It's like the next two big prints back there, the dance pieces, those were, again, I basically, some of you know who the Talking Heads are, but I had a show at the Four Fellows show at Printmaker Hall, and the only prints I had were the two river shacks and the Pelican Point print, and I had to have about 10 things, so I just put the music on and did these dance things with a palette knife, and again, that's sort of how they came. And some of the best ones were done in 10 minutes. You know? And I've been asked more than once back in those days, why don't you keep doing those? And here I am spending, a month on one of the river shacks, and the only answer I could come up with when people would say, well, why don't you keep, doing these monoprints? And I always said, well, I didn't want to have a one-night stand. I want to have an affair. One way of dealing with it. But, anyway, now the next two things are bromeliad prints. I was very lucky to know Morris and Helen Dexter, who basically turned me on. Actually, I got the bromeliad disease from them. And so for 20 years or so, I've been growing and collecting bromeliads. And those two prints, one on the bottom is a woodcut. It was done from mahogany. The top one, the large one, was done as a poster for a World Bromeliad Conference in Orlando in '96. I also had posters of that made. As you can see, there are other bromeliad prints. In the bromeliad prints, I basically work from the plants that I have that are in my yard. And the wonderful thing about bromeliads, the bromeliad people ask me sometimes about, there's a big difference between my bromeliad prints and what a botanical illustrator would do. And some of the questions I had from the bromeliad world was, why don't you use color? And I know I had a show here once, years back, that the title was Visual Radio. Well, that's what I came up with, that most people that own these plants know the colors, and a plant that's a wonderful color at 10 in the morning, you take a picture of it at 3 in the afternoon, it's still great, but it's a different color. So the visual radio was basically dealing with the colors in your mind's eye are better than I can do to reproduce. Anyway, I still grow and collect, well, I'm a collector, but I still have a lot of bromeliads. But anyway, as we move on around the room, there's the gator print, the Lord of the Swamp. I'm from Orlando originally, so I grew up in Florida, and I have 3 uncles that were all gators. And they were all, in fact, they all went to the University of Florida right after World War II. And one of my uncles was actually a cheerleader. Back when University of Florida wasn't co-ed. So, that other school was like the Florida school for the women teachers, or I forget the name. But I basically did that print in '97 because in '96 the Gators won the national championship for the first time. And my uncles were all ecstatic, to say the word. But anyway, and that print is basically an amalgamation of places where I camped. There's actually bromeliad in it. There's, if you look real close, there's actually could be a beer can or a Coke can on the beach. That's in there somewhere. But Then underneath it, and then next to it is another Vermiliac print. That particular one is an etching. One of the early etchings that I added watercolor to add for the colors. I also went through a time of doing sort of patterning of figurative pieces. The large piece, the Unity print, and the little challenge, or I think it's challenge. Anyway, sort of comes from that time when I did a lot of figurative patterning things. One thing about, as I go around this room, one of the main things about all of my work is drawing. You know, drawing is in a lot of it. And, you know, today I hope that our younger kids, I don't know if any of them are really learning how to draw, you know, hand-eye coordination instead of this. I mean, I have a computer, but I have a hard time looking at the screen and doing this. You know, I'm so used to looking where my hand is. But anyway, as we sort of cruise around the room, a lot of the places like the Chaskawissa River Shacks and all these places are places where I camped and fished. Various places that I've sort of depicted as a Floridian and what the real thing looks like. Next to Ken, there's two etchings that are sort of, you know, two of my, well, I'll get to that when we get to over here, but you know, well, I'll say anyway, Rene Magritte and MC Escher were very important to me visually to sort of emulate, and I liked Magritte because he could take things out of context and put them in one painting, and you would see these, and there was really no meaning there. It was just a pure visual thing. So I kind of got into that aspect, and it's just like the Shaman's Portal and the Edges print back there. They're both aquatint etchings that I watercolored later. Anyway, there's a whole technical thing about why you don't see too many color etchings. They are out there, but when you work with copper, the copper reacts to everything. So a lot of the colors that when you print an etching, after you do the etching, you basically smear it with ink and then you wipe all the ink off. It's called intaglio because intaglio means below the surface. So once you etch into the metal, your image is all below the surface, so when you ink it, you smear ink on it and you wipe it all off. And what's below the surface is what prints. The main difference between intaglio printing in linoleum or woodcuts or relief printing is that you don't have to use pressure to print a relief print, where you have to use pressure to do an intaglio print. It's like the monoprints are also done on an etching press with pressure, so that as you run it through, you get basically one print, but that's really it. I have a Degas book of monoprints that I saw. Or actually, every time I go to St. Pete, I go to Haslam's and I go to the used art book section, and I found a Degas book that had all of his monoprints in there. And one of the neat things in there that I saw was when you print one of these monoprints, if you have too much ink, as it rolls through the press, it takes that blob of ink and just rolls it right down your paper. And it was really good for me to see in the Degas book, he had that same problem. And you know, one of the neat things about printmaking, especially traditional intaglio printmaking, is that I'm in connection with Dürer and Rembrandt and all of the printers that, you know, from 400 years ago. It's sort of a way that hooks me, and also people that have taken my classes. That's one of the really cool things about that you're doing something that relates you to something that started 400 years ago. And I think that's kind of cool, you know, because a lot of the stuff that's happening now, no comment, anyway. The next couple of pieces back there, one's called the Book of Notions 2. I've always been a reader. My mother and father were readers, so thankfully I started doing that too. So I've done a bunch of prints that have books in them. And the one on the bottom, it's sort of like things coming out of the book and going into the book. The one above that, Hunter Thompson was one of my heroes for a long time. The whole God's Own Journalist thing. And if you don't know who he is, if you read the comic pages, he's Uncle Duke. Uncle Duke is about him in the Doonesbury comic. But anyway, that particular print was a way to, it's just like, I've done a lot of, you'll see some of the things that are in my hands. It's like, well, what do I do next? The hand jive print is a drawing of my hand holding a pencil, and I just flipped it, and I have a lot of my hands in this stuff, and a lot of times when you're a busy visual artist, you run out of ideas. What do I do next? And I find myself going back to old sketchbooks and flipping through them, and something will jump out at me that I wasn't ready to deal with then, and it comes out in very clear. Sometimes it smacks me in the head, and other times I have to kind of work through it. But anyway, that's sort of where the hand thing comes from. And then above that is a print that's an etching. It's from North Captiva Island, and this is the May after Charlie came through and sort of wiped out south end of North Captiva. And anyway, that's where that comes from. I used to do a fishing trip down there, and anyway, that's a whole. A lot of my work is places where I've been and camped, and so I have a real personal connection with these places. And a lot of these places are no longer there because of the development of Florida and other things. Right next to that, we're now going into mezzotint is something that I started doing. It's about a 400-year-old process. It was one of the very first commercial printing processes where people would do a drawing and then a print of paintings that, the only people that could afford the paintings in those days were the church. But one of the popular things was people would redo those drawings, and mostly etchings, some engravings, and so people could afford to buy that image. Nobody could afford to buy the original, but that's kind of where that came from. And the mezzotint is over here in this display. There's a mezzotint rocker right here, and mezzotint. It's printed in Talio, but instead of having everything below the surface, you rock that back and forth. It's like 2.5 inches, and there's 100 teeth in there. And I'm making, you basically rock and you make burrs on the copper plate. And you would rock one way, and then the next, and then you come from each corner. So you rock the whole plate 6 times. So you make like, I don't know, 1 million little burrs that stick up. And if you print it without doing anything to it, you have this really rich black. It's very hard to get in other mediums, other like etchings. But that's the next two, the top one and the Thunderhead print and the Xerographica. Those were, of course, the Xerographica. It's one of my favorite of all bromeliads. I love it because the name, it's a Tillandsia xerographica, being a graphic artist. There's also that painting right there. That is a Tillandsia xerographica that's blooming. That's what it looks like when it blooms. And that's pretty much a little bit, maybe a little larger than it normally is when it blooms, but again, that particular painting is, I have to give Renee Magritte some credit to, because he would float things in a landscape, and so that's sort of a Magritte takeoff, but he never had the Florida clouds that we see every summer build up in the east, and plus he didn't have like mangroves at the bottom and water, so that also sort of connects me up to Florida. The other, moving on, the top is one of our cats. And that is also a mezzotint, and that one is printed à la poupée, which is a French for little doll. But they would take the blankets from a press and make them into a dauber so that they would print an etching or an engraving or mezzotint with multiple colors with one time through the press. Generally, when you see color, a lot of times each color is a separate run through the press. So that's sort of a way of that particular print. The one under it is of my wife Kathy, who I wouldn't be here without my wonderful wife Kathy, who has allowed me to be an artist all these years. Thank God for nursing, you know. Anyway, let's see, and underneath that is, I have to blame Deborah Weigel on that one. Big, who's my optometrist who was anyway. But, you know, it's like hands and eyes. What's more interesting for all of us? But we all have eyeballs, and they're all a little different and pretty cool. So that's kind of where that particular piece came from. The one moving to the next group, that one above that, that's just a line etch. There's no nothing but lines in that, and that's part of my backyard. Garden Triangles is the name of that. The Triangularis palm is the real star of that, but I also made the triangles of the bromeliads that are there. Underneath it is Imagining Gaia. If you don't know who Gaia was, Gaia is the earth goddess. And there's a little bit of everything in that particular print. There's, you know, a lot of my work has water in it. You know, that particular print has like brain is, like when you're on the water and you see the post that, you know, manatee zone or slow down, anyway, that's in there. And of course there's a bromeliad, but I'm also climbing out of a book. Because one of the things that I do, I listen to books when I work. So when I'm carving or I'm rocking a plate or I listen to books, and I highly recommend listening to books when you work. Or I know some of you might listen to books when you drive, but what makes the Ecstasy of Tedium really cool for me is somebody reading to me. You know, it's just a wonderful thing. I go to the library, it's all for free. You got a CD player, it doesn't cost anything, and the Dunedin Library has a wonderful collection of CD books, so I highly recommend doing that. Anyway, the next ones, there's a print called The Source. Sort of speaks for itself, I guess, you know, just again, my hand out there, or a hand, and then underneath it, another one of my hand, and airbrush. I figure everybody knows what airbrush, you know, the little thing you spray around, but I figure the floating airbrush there. Of course, there's water on the bottom, and that particular print is also à la poupée. There's blue ink, a little red, and also some brown on there. But it's kind of cool. And then the next two, the top one is another bromeliad. It's watercolored after it was printed in black, and then I watercolor it. And then underneath that is an etching that I also watercolored. And then underneath that is a vermilla flower that there really is no such thing as a vermilla flower. That's sort of, we kind of made that up of various bromeliad balloons, and just sort of something I wanted to kind of play with. But anyway, that's kind of like where, well, let me talk about the paintings. Actually, before I do the painting, the one block print that's there, I decided to do a print that's called Inspirations. And in that particular print is, of course, sort of a caricature of me opening up a book. And all the people that are coming out of that book, there's Salvador Dali, there's Ipsy Escher, Magritte, let's see, we got Ayn Rand, let's see, we have Paramahansa Yogananda, which wrote a wonderful book called The Autobiography of a Yogi. I have Isaac Asimov. I have Degas that's there, John Lennon, Hunter Thompson. The top three people on the right side is one of my first art teachers was an uncle named Chuck Siebert. The middle face is Tremaine Spencer, was a high school art teacher. And the person on the right, the left-hand side is Jeff Kronsnoble, who was one of my mentors at USF. There's also a painting by Jean-Louis David, The Death of Marat, that some of you might know. And then across the page from that is Michelangelo's David, who I wanted him to look a little bit like put out because Kathy, my wife, is in the front, and he's like, wait a minute, you know. And then the books that are listed there are books that really meant a lot to me. I didn't have a picture of Don Saff at USF, who started Graphic Studio, but he has a book called, I forget the name of the book right now, but anyway, it's a wonderful book about printmaking. And of course, you know, The Natural Way to Draw, Nicolaides is probably, to me, the best book about drawing. I'm sure today the younger folks would have a hard time dealing with it, but it meant a lot to me. So anyway, that particular print really has a lot of my inspirations on it. And anyway, we'll go from there. The other paintings, the bromeliad painting that's got the people in the little village in there is the last one that I did. I basically did that for a world conference that was in Orlando in September. Some of the other paintings, I know the two that are here. You know, I have a good friend named Harry Zimmerman who taught me about glazing with acrylic. I knew about glazing with oil paint, but I had never realized you could do the same thing with acrylic. So most of my paintings are basically acrylic, but I really use a lot of glazing and stuff when I paint. The little one that's I See You is, that sort of started off as sort of a self-portrait, but it didn't work, so it became what it is. So when you look at it, it's looking at you. And then some of the other landscape paintings that are on the other side are from Captiva, the fishing trip that I went on. I mean, some really, you know, beautiful places down in that part of Florida, Sanibel, Captiva, in that area. And growing up in Orlando, and we moved to Clearwater in '61, and I've seen a lot of change in our state. You know, I won't make any comments about what's happening, but you know, a lot of my prints and paintings are about what Florida is really about, not you know, not a Kmart or you know, a store on every corner and hotels and all of that stuff. Even though I understand you have to have all of that, but so a lot of my Florida images are really about what I've seen in my life. So, but and I'll take questions. But one of the ways I'll sort of stop by saying that one of the things about being a visual artist or any kind of artist, it's probably not a real good way to make a living, but it's a wonderful way to make a life. Questions about anything? Sure.
How long does it take to build a press?
Well, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. You know, I mean, when Jonesy first said, let's build a press, we basically put it together with, I think he had some gears from an old tow motor, and he had some 12-inch, half-inch steel pipe, and we just kind of put it together. I knew that when you do an etching, you have to have maybe a ton of pressure when the print goes through. So I knew you had to have a lot of pressure where the press bed went through. So the very first press we built, the one I still use, I wanted to make sure we had positive thick, so the catch tables were a 1/4 inch lower. I learned that that's not, you know, now after the first one, they're all exactly even, because my first press bed had, all of a sudden, all the corners were higher than the center. But also, one of the shows at Ruth Eckerd Hall, the very first one I hung was a Matisse block print show. And as I'm hanging these, I could see the watermark on the paper, and it was Reeves BFK. Some of you have used, and I'm looking at that, and I had tried to print my blocks on European paper in the Japanese method of burnishing the back, and the paper's too thick. And once I saw that, I figured they have to use a press. So that's when I started. It's like the 2 river shacks and the Pelican Point prints were from that time, and it probably, for the top river shack there, I probably printed, there's only 15 of them, but I probably printed 30. And that's when I found out that my press bed was warped. So, but anyway, seeing the Matisse prints really sort of bucked me into the place where I could use an etching press to print these relief prints and use European paper. And that was a whole other thing. Now, I mostly do my prints on Japanese paper because I love the Japanese paper. The difference is that it's a lot thinner, and when you put the paper down on the plate and the block, and as you rub it, the ink actually comes through the paper, so you can really see it, whereas the European paper, that doesn't happen. So, you know, it's kind of, for me, I can do my relief prints and not use a press. It's kind of cool to not, it's like already cool to not have electricity to do my prints, but to not have the press and the pressure and all that to, you know, to do the traditional Japanese method, which I think you have to be born in Japan and educated there to actually do the way they print. Because of the colors and stuff, there's a whole other, that's a whole, I have to take my class to hear about that.
Please take his class.
Any other